Are you our new mommy? The question came from four voices at once, four 6-year-old quadruplets speaking in perfect unison, their small hands moving in signs as fluid as their words, their eyes burning with desperate hope. The woman standing beside the stranger she'd just met, the beautiful woman with tears still fresh on her cheeks from being abandoned minutes earlier, froze, her breath catching. This is the story of a deaf woman left waiting 43 minutes for a first date that ended in public humiliation. Of a single father watching that rejection unfold from across the room, wrestling with whether to intervene. And of 4 children who believed in magic the moment they saw someone who finally spoke their language. Sometimes the worst moments of our lives are actually doorways. Before we continue, please tell us where in the world are you tuning in from? We love seeing how far our stories travel. Courtney Lane had been checking her phone for the 43rd time when she finally saw him walk through the cafe door. Relief flooded through her chest. He'd come. He was real, not another ghost who'd disappear the moment things got complicated. She stood, smoothing her dress, trying to hide how her hands trembled slightly. The autumn sunlight streaming through the corner cafe's windows caught the highlights in her long brown hair as she smiled, hopeful, nervous, trying not to seem desperate even though she'd been sitting alone long enough for her coffee to go cold. The man, Marcus, his dating profile had said, was exactly as his photos promised. Tall, clean-cut, wearing a perfectly pressed button-down shirt. He looked like someone who had his life together, someone who wouldn't run when things got difficult. Courtney waved to catch his attention, then quickly pulled out her phone, her fingers moving across the screen. She held it up so he could see. "Hi, I'm Courtney. It's so nice to finally meet you." As she showed him the message, she spoke aloud as well, her voice slightly flat in the way voices sometimes are when you can't hear your own words. "Hi, Marcus." Marcus stopped 3 feet from the table. His eyes flicked from her smiling face to the phone screen, then back to her face. Confusion flickered across his features, then something else. Realization, discomfort. He didn't move to sit down. Courtney's smile faltered slightly as she watched his expression change. It was subtle at first, a slight widening of the eyes, a barely perceptible step backward. Then his face shifted into something Courtney had seen too many times before. Uncomfortable realization followed by thinly veiled disgust. Marcus pulled out his own phone. His thumbs moved quickly across the screen. Courtney's phone buzzed. She looked down at the message. "I'm sorry, I didn't realize you were deaf. This isn't going to work for me. I need someone I can actually communicate with normally. Good luck." The words hit like a slap. Courtney looked up from her phone to find Marcus already backing away, his expression a mixture of discomfort and something close to pity. He turned and walked out before she could even process what had happened. Courtney stood frozen, phone in hand, the rejection message still glowing on her screen in a cafe full of Saturday afternoon strangers who had just witnessed her humiliation. From his table by the window, Jonathan Myers watched the entire scene unfold, and something in his chest twisted painfully. He'd been here for 20 minutes, nursing his coffee and trying to read the same paragraph of his novel for the 5th time. His friend Ryan had canceled their meetup last minute, family emergency, but Jonathan had already arranged for Margaret, their nanny, to take the quadruplets to the park across the street. He could see them through the window. 2 boys with short brown hair and 2 girls with long curly brown hair, all 4 of them blurs of energy climbing on playground equipment while Margaret watched with patient amusement. He should have been relaxing, enjoying this rare hour of quiet. Instead, he couldn't stop watching the woman at the table near the door, the one who'd been checking her phone with increasing anxiety, the hope on her face slowly hardening into resignation. When her date had arrived, Jonathan had felt relief for her. Then he'd seen her hold up her phone, showing the screen to the man. Then he'd seen the man's body language change, the step back, the uncomfortable expression, the hands raised in rejection. And now he was watching her stand frozen, phone still in hand, as the man walked out without even sitting down. Jonathan couldn't hear what had happened, but he didn't need to. The woman's face told the entire story. Hope crumbling into humiliation, the effort it took to hold herself together as every eye in the cafe pretended not to see. Jonathan's hands tightened around his coffee cup. He wanted to intervene, to say something,
to tell that coward exactly what kind of small-minded person he was. But what right did he have? He was a stranger. Getting involved would only make things worse, make her feel more exposed. So he stayed in his seat and hated himself a little for it.
The woman sank back into her chair. Her shoulders shook with silent sobs she was clearly trying to suppress. Her hands covered her face for a moment, then dropped to the table, fingers pressing against the cold surface as if anchoring herself. Then, abruptly, she stood. Her chair scraped against the floor with a sound that made several people look up. She grabbed her purse, her movements jerky with the effort of not breaking down completely, and rushed toward the door. She moved too fast, too upset to notice the slightly raised threshold at the entrance. Her foot caught. The woman stumbled forward, her body pitching toward the doorframe. She threw her hands out to catch herself, but the momentum was too much. Her shoulder hit the frame with a dull thud, and her purse flew from her grip, its contents scattering across the floor in a chaos of lipstick tubes, keys, a phone, loose change rolling in different directions. Jonathan was out of his seat before he consciously decided to move. He was on his knees beside her in seconds, gathering the scattered items. His hands moved quickly, efficiently, collecting everything into a neat pile. "I've got it," he said gently. "Are you okay?" Courtney was sitting on the floor now, her face flushed with embarrassment and tears, reaching for her things with trembling hands. She looked up at him, and he could see her trying to read his lips. Then her hands moved, a simple gesture, pointing to her ear and shaking her head. She pulled out her phone with shaking fingers and quickly typed, showing him the screen. "Thank you, I'm deaf. I'm sorry for the trouble." Jonathan's expression softened immediately. He stood, holding her purse and belongings, and without hesitation, his hands moved in sign language. "Don't apologize. Are you okay?" The effect was instantaneous. Courtney's eyes widened, her mouth falling open in shock. Her hands moved automatically, responding in sign language. "You know ASL?" Jonathan nodded, signing back with fluid precision. "My son is deaf. We all use it at home." He extended his free hand to help her up, speaking aloud as he signed, "I'm Jonathan." Courtney took his hand, letting him pull her to her feet. She was still staring at him like he'd just performed a miracle. Her hands moved rapidly. "I'm Courtney. I can't believe you know sign language. This never happens." "I saw what happened," Jonathan signed, his expression sympathetic. "I'm sorry. That guy is an idiot." A laugh burst out of Courtney, half sob, half genuine amusement. She signed back, "Thank you. That's exactly what he is." Then her hands slowed, becoming more uncertain. "I'm sorry you had to witness that disaster." "Don't apologize," Jonathan signed firmly. "You did nothing wrong." They stood there, in the doorway, two strangers communicating in silence while the cafe buzzed with conversation around them. And for the first time since she'd arrived, Courtney's face showed something other than pain. She smiled. It was small, tentative, but real. Jonathan smiled back, and he was about to say something else, maybe offer to buy her a coffee, maybe just wish her a better rest of her day, when the cafe door burst open with explosive force. "Daddy!" 4 voices shouted in unison. Well, 3 voices shouted. One child remained silent, but moved with the same excited energy, as 4 6-year-old bodies came barreling through the entrance like a perfectly synchronized storm. "Daddy, you have to come see," Aurelia started, her long curly brown hair bouncing. "There's a dog at the park who knows tricks," Orion continued, his short brown hair sticking up in different directions. "And he can dance," Leora added, her long curly brown hair flowing behind her. All 3 speaking children stopped mid-sentence as they registered the scene before them, their father standing very close to a strange woman, holding her purse, both of them clearly in the middle of a conversation. Atlas, the silent one with short brown hair, was the first to notice his father's hands. His sharp eyes caught the ASL position Jonathan's hands had frozen in, and his face lit up with understanding and excitement. His hands moved rapidly, signing to his siblings. "Dad is signing with her. She knows our language." Orion's mouth fell open. Leora gasped. Aurelia's entire face transformed into pure, unadulterated hope. "No," Jonathan said immediately, recognizing the trajectory of this moment and signing sharply. "Whatever you're thinking." But Atlas signed something else to his siblings, his small hands moving with excited precision. Is she deaf like me? The question hung between the four children for only a heartbeat before they turned as one unit to look at Courtney with expressions that Jonathan's heart clenched. "Kids, don't," Jonathan started, but 6-year-olds, especially 6-year-olds who'd spent their entire conscious lives wishing for something impossible, don't listen to warnings. All four children stepped forward together. They looked at each other for one brief moment, some kind of silent agreement passing between them, and then, in perfect unison, their hands moved in sign language as 3 voices spoke the words aloud. "Are you our new mommy?" The question hung in the air and in their hands, visible, unmistakable, impossible to misunderstand. Courtney saw every movement of their small hands forming the signs. Her eyes went wide, her breath catching audibly. She looked from the children to Jonathan and back again, her own hands frozen halfway to her chest. Jonathan's face went scarlet. Margaret made a strangled sound. "Kids," Jonathan signed sharply, mortification burning through every gesture. "This is Courtney. She's someone I just met. She had a bad day and I was helping her."
Jonathan signed apologetically to Courtney. "I am so sorry. They don't usually." But Courtney wasn't looking at Jonathan anymore. She was looking at the 4 children arranged before her like a jury about to deliver a verdict, and her eyes were filling with tears again, but these were different tears. Atlas stepped forward. He was smaller than his siblings, his movements more careful, more deliberate. His hands moved in sign language, the gestures precise and heartfelt. "You're deaf like me?" Courtney knelt down, so she was eye level with him, signing back. "Yes, just like you." "Do people think you're weird?" Atlas signed, his young face serious. "Sometimes," Courtney signed honestly. "Us too," Atlas signed, "because we all sign at home. Kids at school laugh." Courtney's expression crumbled and rebuilt itself in the span of a heartbeat. She signed to all 4 children. "Then those kids don't understand that you're special. You're amazing." "You're perfect," Aurelia signed and spoke, her enthusiasm uncontainable. "You know our special language. Everyone at school says we're weird because we sign at home. You wouldn't think we're weird." "And you're pretty," Orion added with 6-year-old pragmatism, signing as he spoke. Leora, the gentlest of the 4, simply signed, "We've been looking for someone like you." Atlas's hands formed careful words. "We've been waiting for someone like you." Courtney's laugh was half sob, half incredulous joy. Her hands shook as she signed back, "I just met your father 60 seconds ago." Jonathan wanted the floor to open up and swallow him whole. This was beyond mortifying. This was his children essentially proposing marriage to a stranger on his behalf in a public cafe, while said stranger had just experienced devastating rejection minutes earlier. He started to sign another apology, but Courtney was laughing, really, truly laughing. The sound was slightly unusual, the cadence of someone who couldn't hear their own laughter, but it was genuine and full of joy. She signed to the children, "How about we start by being friends? What are your names?" And just like that, Jonathan's world tilted on its axis.
20 minutes later, they'd moved to a larger table, after Jonathan had apologetically asked Margaret if she could stay a bit longer. Margaret, bless her, had simply smiled knowingly and said she had nowhere to be. The children had commandeered Courtney completely. They were taking turns introducing themselves with the kind of elaborate detail only 6-year-olds considered necessary. Aurelia went first, her hands moving in careful signs. "I'm Aurelia Celeste Myers. I'm 6 3/4. I like pink and purple and horses, even though I've never ridden one. I want to be a veterinarian when I grow up, but also maybe a princess." Orion followed. "I'm Orion James Myers. I'm 6 3/4 too, because we are quadruplets, which means we all came out on the same day. I like dinosaurs and space and making people laugh. I can burp the alphabet." He demonstrated this talent immediately, making it to G before Jonathan's sharp look made him stop. Leora was next, her signs gentle and precise. "I'm Leora May Myers. I like reading and drawing and flowers. I'm glad you're here." Atlas signed last, his movements more careful than his siblings. "I'm Atlas River Myers. I'm the only one who can't hear, but everyone learns sign language for me. I like science and building things and swimming." Courtney looked at each child like they were the most precious things she'd ever encountered. She signed, "Those are beautiful names. Do you know what they all mean?" Four heads shook in unison. Courtney's hands moved as she explained. Atlas was a titan who held up the sky. Orion is a constellation, a group of stars. Leora means light in Hebrew, and Aurelia means golden in Latin. She smiled at Jonathan. Someone chose very meaningful names. Jonathan felt his face warm. "My ex-wife chose them," he signed, then immediately regretted bringing Amy up. She was very into mythology and stars. If the kids noticed the mention of their mother, they didn't show it. They were too busy being enchanted by Courtney's presence. "Can we play a game?" Orion signed excitedly.
And that's how Jonathan found himself watching 4 children and 1 recently heartbroken woman play what they called silent charades, a game where everyone had to act things out without speaking or signing. Leora tried to act out astronaut riding a dinosaur, which mostly involved her making exaggerated stomping motions while pretending to float. Orion attempted pizza making itself, complete with spinning in circles and then flopping dramatically onto the floor as if he'd been tossed by an invisible pizza chef. Atlas did an impression of their teacher, Mrs. Maria, which was so spot on that Courtney laughed until she snorted, then looked mortified, which made the kids laugh even harder. "Your turn," Aurelia signed to Courtney. Courtney stood, thinking for a moment, then began flapping her arms wildly before pretending to blow out candles. "Birthday," Atlas signed triumphantly. "Yes," Aurelia signed excitedly. She turned to Courtney, her hands moving rapidly. "Our birthday was last month. All 4 of us turned 6 on the same day because we're quadruplets." "It was so fun," Orion added, signing enthusiastically. "We had 4 cakes." "That's not true," Leora signed with a small smile. "We had 1 big cake." "It was big enough for 4 cakes," Orion insisted. Aurelia turned back to Courtney. "When's your birthday?" Courtney signed casually. "Actually, it's tomorrow." All 4 children froze mid-motion, their eyes going comically wide. "Tomorrow, tomorrow?" they signed in perfect unison. "Tomorrow, tomorrow?" Orion signed rapidly. "Like actual tomorrow? October 15th tomorrow?" Courtney laughed at their dramatic reaction. "Yes, actual tomorrow." The children immediately huddled together, their hands flying in rapid conversation, too quick for Courtney to follow. Jonathan tried to intervene. "Hey, what are you 4 planning?" But they waved him off with the universal child gesture for adults not invited. Finally, they turned back to Courtney as one unit. Leora, elected spokesperson, signed carefully. "Do you have special plans, like a big party with friends?"
Courtney's smile flickered. It was subtle, barely noticeable, but Jonathan caught it. She signed breezily, "Oh, probably just a quiet day. Maybe I'll treat myself to something nice." But Atlas, perceptive in the way that children who live in silence often are, tilted his head and signed, "Will you celebrate with friends?" Courtney hesitated. Her hands moved slowly, deliberately. "It'll just be me, but that's okay. I'm used to quiet birthdays." The 4 children exchanged looks, some kind of silent communication passing between them that Jonathan knew from experience was either going to result in something wonderful or something that would give him a heart attack. "That's not okay," Atlas signed with serious determination that belied his 6 years. "Nobody should celebrate their birthday alone." "We should have a party," Aurelia signed enthusiastically. "Here, tomorrow." Courtney looked genuinely touched but uncertain. Her hands moved. "You want to throw me a birthday party? You just met me." "So," Orion signed with impeccable 6-year-old logic, "we like you. That's enough." "Please," Leora signed, her expression so earnest it could melt steel. Courtney looked at Jonathan, her eyes asking permission, asking if this was real or just children making promises they couldn't keep. Jonathan signed with a gentle smile. "Only if you want to, no pressure. But I should warn you, once they've decided on a party, there's no stopping them." Watching Courtney's face, Jonathan saw something he recognized because he'd felt it himself. The moment when you realize you don't have to be alone anymore, when someone sees you and doesn't flinch away.
Courtney's hands moved, and even though she was signing, he could hear the emotion in the gesture. I would love that. Really. Truly. The children exploded with joy. Aurelia and Leora started dancing. Orion did a victory lap around the table. Atlas, who couldn't hear their shouts, felt the vibrations of his siblings jumping and grinned just as widely.
They spent the next 15 minutes planning the party with the kind of elaborate detail usually reserved for royal weddings. There would be cake, chocolate, unanimously decided, balloons, lots of them, and presents from the heart, which apparently meant handmade gifts because the kids' allowance was not big enough for good stuff. Margaret eventually reminded Jonathan gently that it was almost dinner time. The children protested but complied when Jonathan gave them the look, the one that meant no negotiations. As they prepared to leave, each child hugged Courtney goodbye. Leora held on extra long. Atlas signed, "Thank you for playing with us." Before they left, Jonathan pulled out his phone. "Can I get your number?" he signed, then quickly added, "to coordinate tomorrow, the party." Courtney's smile was radiant as she entered her number. She signed, "Text me tomorrow morning." Jonathan hesitated, then signed, "Courtney, thank you. You made today unexpected, in the best way." Courtney's chest tightened. She signed back, "Same to you. See you tomorrow." As they walked out of the cafe, 4 kids bouncing excitedly and one bemused father in tow, Jonathan glanced back. Courtney was watching them through the window, her hand raised in a small wave, her face transformed from the devastated woman he'd seen earlier. "Daddy," Aurelia signed as they crossed the street back to where Margaret had parked, "do you like her?" Jonathan looked at his daughter's hopeful face. "I just met her, sweetheart." "But do you like her?" Orion signed more insistently. Jonathan thought about Courtney's laugh, the way she'd knelt to Atlas's level, how naturally she'd fit into their chaotic family dynamic. He signed honestly, "Yes, I like her." 4 faces lit up like he just announced Christmas was coming early. That evening, after the kids were finally in bed, a process that took an extra 45 minutes because they kept popping back out to ask questions about tomorrow's party, Jonathan sat on his worn leather couch with a beer he wasn't really drinking. His mind kept returning to the cafe, to Courtney's face when that jackass had walked out, to the way her eyes had lit up when she realized Jonathan knew sign language, to his children's unbridled joy at finding someone who spoke their language, who didn't think they were weird. "Are you our new mommy?" He'd wanted to die in that moment. But watching Courtney laugh, watching her play with his kids, watching her fit so seamlessly into their strange, signing, chaotic world, Jonathan's thoughts drifted backward, pulled by the weight of memory. 7 years ago, Jonathan was 28 and believed he had life figured out. He'd been married to his college sweetheart, Amy Rowland, beautiful, ambitious, with dreams of Broadway stages and movie screens. She'd put those dreams on hold when they married, taking a job doing backstage work at a local theater company. When they discovered she was pregnant, they'd been overjoyed. When the ultrasound revealed not 1, not 2, but 4 healthy babies, their joy had tangled with sheer terror. "Quadruplets," the doctor had said, her voice careful. "The odds are approximately 1 in 729,000 pregnancies." Amy had gripped Jonathan's hand so tightly her nails left crescents in his palm. "4," she'd whispered. "We're having 4 babies." They'd both laughed and cried in that sterile doctor's office, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what was coming. Atlas, Orion, Leora, and Aurelia arrived on a cold September morning after an emergency C-section. Jonathan had held each tiny bundle, impossibly small, impossibly perfect, and felt a fierce love surge through him that rewrote every priority he'd ever had. The first 2 years were chaos, held together with caffeine and stubborn determination. Jonathan's parents helped frequently, taking shifts so he and Amy could sleep. The babies were healthy, hitting their milestones, growing into distinct personalities. But Jonathan could see the restlessness growing in Amy's eyes every time she watched the theater company's performances from backstage. Every time an actress took a bow to thunderous applause, something in Amy's expression flickered. Longing, regret, resentment. When the quadruplets turned 2, everything shattered. Amy sat him down one evening after the children were finally asleep, after hours of bedtime stories and negotiations and one emergency diaper change. Her face was flushed with an excitement Jonathan hadn't seen in months. "I got a call today," she said, her voice trembling. "Marcus Levy, the casting director, wants me to audition for a recurring role in a new streaming series. They're filming in California. This is my chance, John, my one real shot." Jonathan had felt pride first, genuine happiness for her. "That's amazing, honey. We could figure it out. Maybe we could—" "I'm going alone," Amy interrupted, the words rushing out like she'd been holding them back for too long. "I can't do this with 4 toddlers, John. I can't. They're wonderful, they're beautiful, but they weren't part of the plan. I never wanted this many kids. I wanted 1, maybe 2, someday. Not 4 all at once. Not 4 who need constant attention and care and everything." Jonathan had felt the floor drop out from under him. "Amy, there are children. I can't be the mother they need and the actress I want to be." Her voice cracked, but her eyes were determined. "I have to choose, and I'm choosing me." The divorce was efficient and emotionless. Amy signed over full custody without hesitation. She promised to call regularly, to stay involved, to be a mother even from a distance. For the first few months, she kept that promise. Weekly video calls where the kids would press their faces to the screen, shouting, "Mama, Mama," while Amy smiled and told them about auditions in California sunshine. Then the calls became bi-weekly, then monthly, then only on birthdays and holidays, then barely at all. Jonathan had begged her during one of their increasingly rare phone conversations. "They need their mother, Amy. Please, even just occasional calls." "They have you," Amy had said, her voice distant, like she was already somewhere else. "I'm not cut out for motherhood, John. I tried to tell myself I could do both, but I can't. I'm sorry." The calls stopped almost entirely after that. Christmas cards came sporadically, birthday presents arrived late or not at all. The kids, now 6, barely remembered what she looked like. Jonathan had put away all the photos, after Leora, 4 years old at the time, had stood in front of the mantle photo of Amy for 20 minutes, tracing her mother's face with one small finger before asking, "Why doesn't Mama love us?" He'd had no good answer then. He still didn't. But forgetting didn't erase the longing. Jonathan saw it in small, heartbreaking moments. Leora watching other mothers at the park. Aurelia's quiet tears after school events where every other child had 2 parents present. The bullying was perhaps the worst part. Kids could be cruel, and "Where's your mommy?" had become a taunt that followed his children daily. Then, when Atlas was 3, everything became even more complicated. Jonathan had been working from home that day, taking a video call in his home office while the kids played in the living room. He'd heard the crash, a sickening, splintering sound that sent ice through his veins, and run out to find Atlas on the floor, the heavy oak bookshelf collapsed beside him. A large hardcover encyclopedia had struck him directly on the side of his head. The hospital stay had been a nightmare of tests and worried doctors, and Jonathan sitting by Atlas's bedside, holding his son's small hand and praying to a higher power he wasn't sure he believed in. Atlas survived, but the head injury had damaged his auditory nerves irreparably. "The damage is permanent," the doctor had explained gently. "Atlas will never regain his hearing. We can discuss cochlear implants when he's older, but there's no guarantee they'll work, and they're not appropriate for everyone." Jonathan had held his 3-year-old son. The hospital stay had been a nightmare of tests and worried doctors, and Jonathan sitting by Atlas's bedside, holding his son's small hand and praying to a higher power he wasn't sure he believed in. Atlas survived, but the head injury had damaged his auditory nerves irreparably. "The damage is permanent," the doctor had explained gently. "Atlas will never regain his hearing. We can discuss cochlear implants when he's older, but there's no guarantee they'll work, and they're not appropriate for everyone." Jonathan had held his 3-year-old son, his adventurous, chattering, singing little boy, and watched him retreat into a silent world. The months that followed were the hardest of Jonathan's life. Atlas went from outgoing to withdrawn, frustrated by his inability to communicate, isolated by his siblings' voices he could no longer hear. The other children didn't understand why their brother wouldn't talk anymore, why he'd get upset when they tried to play. Jonathan made a decision. If Atlas was going to live in a silent world, he wouldn't be alone there. Jonathan learned American Sign Language with fierce, determined intensity. He watched videos late into the night, practiced until his hands ached, attended classes for parents of deaf children. He taught Orion, Leora, and Aurelia with games and songs and patient repetition. By the time Atlas was 4, the entire household communicated exclusively in ASL at home. It became their private language, their special bond. At school, the kids spoke aloud with their classmates and teachers. But at home, their hands danced through conversations about homework and imaginary adventures and what they wanted for dinner. Atlas never felt left out because his family had joined him in his silence. But it also meant Jonathan's world had narrowed considerably. Dating? Romance? How could he explain to someone that any partner would need to learn an entirely new language just to have dinner at his house? Who would want a package deal of 5 people, especially when one came with unique challenges? Who would want a man whose ex-wife had abandoned their children, leaving behind a legacy of questions Jonathan couldn't answer and wounds he couldn't heal?
He'd tried once, about a year ago. A woman from work had asked him out. They'd gone to dinner. She'd been lovely, funny, kind, interested in his work. But when he'd tried to explain about the kids, about Atlas, about the ASL requirement, he'd watched her face shut down. "That's a lot," she'd said politely. "I don't think I'm ready for that level of complexity." Jonathan hadn't tried again after that. Until today. Until a deaf woman had tripped in a cafe doorway and Jonathan's entire carefully controlled world had tilted sideways. His phone buzzed. Courtney's name lit up the screen. "I just wanted to say thank you again for today. Your children are wonderful. I can't remember the last time I felt so included. See you tomorrow?" Jonathan smiled, his thumbs moving over the keyboard. "They are wonderful, aren't they? Even when they're mortifying me in public. Tomorrow at noon? I'll bring the chaos, you bring yourself." Her response came quickly. "I can't wait. Good night, Jonathan." "Good night, Courtney." Jonathan set down his phone and allowed himself a moment of hope. Just a small one. Just enough to imagine that maybe, possibly, the universe was offering him something good for once. The next morning was controlled chaos. The quadruplets were awake at 6 a.m., vibrating with excitement. They made decorations, construction paper chains, hand-drawn banners that said, "Happy Birthday, Courtney." Jonathan had enlisted Margaret's help to actually make the cafe presentable. He'd called the owner of the corner cafe, a kind woman named Sarah, who'd watched his kids grow up through weekly Saturday visits, and asked if he could rent the back corner for a few hours. For the woman from yesterday, Sarah had asked knowingly, "The one your kids decided to adopt?" Word traveled fast in small cafes. Yes, Jonathan had admitted. They invited her to a birthday party. "Bring your decorations by 10, Sarah had said warmly. "I'll make sure that corner is ready." And Jonathan, "She seemed lovely. Your kids have good instincts." By 11:30, the cafe looked like a birthday explosion. Handmade banners hung from every available surface, balloons purchased in bulk by Margaret because Jonathan had underestimated how many lots of balloons actually meant to 6-year-olds, bobbed from chairs and tables. The kids had insisted on a chocolate cake, which Margaret had somehow procured on short notice. Atlas held a sign he'd made, carefully lettered in both English and ASL fingerspelling, "Welcome, Courtney." Jonathan looked at his 4 children, all 4 dressed in matching white outfits they'd insisted on coordinating for Courtney's special day, and felt his heart squeeze. "Remember," he signed to all 4 of them, "this is Courtney's day. We're celebrating her, okay? Let her talk, let her enjoy herself, don't overwhelm her." 4 solemn nods. Jonathan didn't believe them for a second. At exactly noon, the cafe door opened. Courtney walked in, and Jonathan forgot how to breathe. She wore a simple blue dress that matched her eyes, her long hair falling in soft waves over her shoulders. But it wasn't her appearance that struck him, it was her expression. Nervous hope mixed with genuine excitement, like someone who'd been invited to a party and couldn't quite believe it was real. "Surprise!" all 4 children signed together, their faces glowing. Courtney's hands flew to her mouth. Her eyes went wide, taking in the decorations, the balloons, the cake, the 4 eager faces watching her reaction. Tears spilled down her cheeks, but she was smiling, the kind of smile that transforms an entire face. She signed, "You did all this for me?"
Of course, Aurelia signed enthusiastically. It's your birthday. Happy birthday, Courtney, Jonathan signed, his expression warm. Courtney looked at him, and something passed between them. Gratitude, connection, the beginning of something neither of them had names for yet. Thank you, she signed. All of you. This is the most beautiful thing anyone's ever done for me.
What followed was, without question, the most chaotic, joyful birthday party Jonathan had ever witnessed. The kids insisted Courtney sit at the head of the table, a spot they decorated with extra balloons and a handmade crown Leora had crafted from construction paper and glitter. You have to wear it, Leora signed seriously. All birthday people wear crowns. Courtney placed the slightly lopsided crown on her head with the solemnity of someone being coronated, which made all 4 kids dissolve into giggles. Orion presented his gift first, a drawing of Courtney surrounded by 4 stick figures. That's us, he signed proudly, and that's you. We're all holding hands because we're friends now. Courtney's bottom lip trembled as she signed, "This is beautiful. Thank you, Orion." Leora's gift was a bracelet made from colorful beads she'd strung herself. "The colors are happy colors," she signed as she helped Courtney put it on, "so you'll always remember happy days." Aurelia had written a poem, or what 6-year-olds consider poetry, which mostly rhymed Courtney with journey and day with stay. But she read it and signed it with such earnest passion that Courtney had to wipe her eyes. Atlas's gift was last. He approached slowly, holding a small wooden box he'd clearly spent time decorating. Inside was a smooth stone painted blue. "It's a worry stone," Atlas signed carefully. "My teacher taught us about them. When you're sad or worried, you hold it and it helps. I painted it blue because blue is calm." He paused, then added, "You seemed sad yesterday. I don't want you to be sad anymore." Courtney's composure broke. She pulled Atlas into a hug, holding him tightly while her shoulders shook with silent sobs. Atlas hugged her back, his small arms fierce and certain. When Courtney finally pulled back, she opened her arms wide, looking at all 4 children. Aurelia, Leora, and Orion rushed forward, and Courtney wrapped all 4 of them in a tight embrace, holding them close while her shoulders shook with silent sobs. When she finally pulled back, wiping her eyes, she signed to all of them, "Thank you, all of you. These are the most beautiful gifts I've ever received." The 4 of them beamed. Then came the cake. Chocolate with chocolate frosting, because the kids had been unanimous in their decision. Sarah, the cafe owner, had even added birthday candles. "Make a wish," all 4 kids signed excitedly. Courtney closed her eyes, took a breath, and blew out the candles. When she opened her eyes, she was smiling through tears. "What did you wish for?" Orion signed. "If I tell you, it won't come true," Courtney signed back. "But you can give us a hint," Aurelia pressed. Courtney looked at the 4 expectant faces, then at Jonathan sitting at the end of the table watching this unfold with an expression she couldn't quite read. She signed, "I wished that I'd never feel alone again." "You won't," Leora signed with absolute conviction, "because you have us now." As the party wound down and the kids played a game of silent tag outside under Margaret's supervision, Jonathan and Courtney sat alone at the table. The remains of cake and crumpled wrapping paper surrounded them, evidence of joy recently experienced. "Thank you," Courtney signed, her movement slower now, tired but content. "This has been the best birthday I've ever had." The kids were excited, Jonathan signed back with a smile. They'd been planning since yesterday. "They're wonderful," Courtney signed. "All of them." She paused, watching them through the window, then signed carefully, "Their mother." Jonathan's expression shifted, not hurt, just resigned. "She left when they were 2, got a big acting opportunity in California, and decided she couldn't be a mother and pursue her dreams at the same time." His signs were matter-of-fact, like he'd made peace with it. "The kids barely remember her. She calls maybe twice a year now." "I'm sorry," Courtney signed. "We manage," Jonathan signed. "But yesterday, when they asked if you were their new mom, that's been their wish for a while, especially when they see other kids with both parents." "That must be hard for them," Courtney signed softly. "It is," Jonathan agreed. Then his expression changed, becoming curious. "What about you? How long have you been deaf?" Courtney's hands stilled for a moment, then began moving. 7 years. I was 23. Car accident. Drunk driver ran a red light. Her signs became slower, heavier. Funny how they called it lucky, like losing an entire sense was a small thing. It's not a small thing, Jonathan signed. My friends didn't know what to do with me after. Not their fault. They tried. But conversations became work. Group hangouts were impossible. Eventually, they stopped trying. Easier that way. She paused. My family, too. They love me, but it's hard. Holidays are exhausting. I spend most of the time smiling and nodding, pretending I understand what's happening. That sounds lonely, Jonathan signed. It is, Courtney signed simply. I've been alone for a long time. Not anymore, Jonathan signed. At least if the kids have anything to say about it. Fair warning, they've probably already planned your next 10 birthdays. Courtney laughed, the tension breaking. I wouldn't mind that. Good, Jonathan signed, because once they decide they like someone, they're relentless. Through the window, Atlas was teaching his siblings some kind of elaborate signing game. Courtney watched them, her expression soft. Atlas is lucky, she signed, to have a family that learned his language. Most deaf kids don't get that. He's my son, Jonathan signed. Of course we learned. Not everyone would, Courtney signed, meeting his eyes. Trust me. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the kids play. I should probably get going, Courtney signed. Let you get back to your day. Stay in touch, Jonathan signed. The kids will ask about you constantly if you don't. I'd like that, Courtney signed, smiling. Friends? Friends, Jonathan signed back. But as Courtney stood to leave, as the kids rushed back in to say goodbye with enthusiastic hugs, Jonathan felt something shift. Not romance, not yet, but possibility. The sense that maybe his carefully controlled, narrow world was about to expand in ways he hadn't imagined. And for the first time in years, that didn't terrify him. Over the next weeks, Courtney integrated into their lives in a way that felt both natural and miraculous. She started joining them for dinners twice a week. The kids would compete for who got to sit next to her. Aurelia would braid Courtney's hair. Orion would tell her elaborate stories about his day at school, complete with dramatic reenactments. Leora would quietly do homework beside her, occasionally signing questions. And Atlas would sit close, comfortable in their shared silence. One Thursday evening, 6 weeks after the birthday party, Courtney was helping with bedtime when Aurelia looked up at her with serious eyes. Can I ask you something? Aurelia signed. Of course, Courtney signed back. Why don't you have a family? The question hung in the air. Jonathan, reading to Orion in the next bed, tensed but didn't intervene. Courtney sat down on Aurelia's bed, thinking carefully before signing. I used to have a family. My parents, my sister, but after my accident, when I couldn't hear anymore, things got hard. Not because they didn't love me. They did, but they didn't know how to talk to me anymore. It made everyone sad and frustrated.
That's stupid, Aurelia signed with 6-year-old bluntness. You're easy to talk to. Thank you, sweetheart. But it wasn't anyone's fault. Sometimes people don't know how to adapt when things change. Did it make you sad? Leora signed from her bed. Very sad for a long time. Are you still sad? Atlas signed. Courtney looked at the 4 faces watching her, at Jonathan still holding his book but paying complete attention, at this chaotic, signing, beautiful family that had somehow become hers. Not anymore, she signed honestly. Not since I met you. Atlas nodded, satisfied. Good, because you're part of our family now. I am? Courtney signed, her throat tight. 4 heads nodded in unison. You speak our language, Aurelian signed. That makes you family. Jonathan and Courtney's friendship gradually evolved into something deeper. There was the night they stayed up talking after the kids were asleep, signing in the dim light of the kitchen, sharing stories about their childhoods, their dreams, the paths that had led them to that cafe. There was the Saturday at the zoo when Aurelian skinned his knee and Courtney was the one who scooped him up, kissed the scrape, and signed, "You're so brave," while he hiccuped through tears. There was the school recital where all 4 kids performed a song in ASL and Courtney sat beside Jonathan in the audience, both of them crying as they watched. There was the evening Jonathan came home from work exhausted and frustrated, and Courtney was there, just there, making dinner, helping with homework, giving him a look that said, I've got this. Go breathe. There was the moment Jonathan realized he was in love. It was a Tuesday. Nothing special, just an ordinary Tuesday.
Courtney was at the kitchen table helping Leora with a math worksheet. Atlas was building something with blocks nearby. Aurelian and Orion were arguing about whose turn it was to feed their goldfish. Courtney's hair was falling out of its ponytail. She had flour on her cheek from the cookies they'd attempted earlier. She was signing one-handed to Leora while using the other to point at the worksheet, completely at ease in the chaos. And Jonathan thought, this is what I want for the rest of my life. That night, after the kids were in bed, Jonathan asked Courtney to stay. I need to tell you something, he signed. Okay, Courtney signed, looking nervous. I'm in love with you. Courtney's hands froze mid-motion. Her eyes went wide. I need you to know I love you, not because you're convenient or because you're good with the kids, though you are. I love you because you're kind and patient and brave, because you make me laugh, because you see my children as blessings, not burdens, because when I imagine my future, you're in it. Courtney's hands were shaking as she signed back, Jonathan, you don't have to say anything, he signed quickly. I just needed you to know. Jonathan, Courtney signed again, more firmly this time. Stop signing for a second and look at me. He did. She leaned forward and kissed him. It was gentle, tentative, perfect. Her hands came up to cup his face, and his arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her closer. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Courtney signed, I love you too. I've loved you since that first ridiculous party when your children looked at me like I was magic. I was just scared to believe it was real. It's real, Jonathan signed, pressing his forehead to hers. This is real. Then yes, Courtney signed, laughing and crying at the same time. Yes to whatever this becomes. 12 months later, on a crisp October afternoon, Jonathan stood in the corner cafe, the same cafe where this had all begun, nervous in a way he hadn't been in years. He'd enlisted the kids' help with his proposal plan, which in retrospect might have been a mistake because none of them could keep a secret to save their lives. Courtney thought it was just their usual coffee meetup. She'd arrived wearing jeans and a sweater, her hair in a casual bun, with no idea what was waiting. They'd been sitting at the same table, the one near the door where they'd first met, for about 15 minutes when the cafe door burst open. 4 children came tumbling in, wearing matching t-shirts that said, Say Yes, in both English and ASL fingerspelling. Courtney's mouth dropped open. What? Jonathan stood, his heart hammering. All 4 kids rushed to form a semicircle around Courtney's chair, their faces glowing with excitement and terrible secret-keeping. Courtney, Jonathan signed, his hands shaking slightly. You came into our lives when we needed magic most. You taught my children that being different is beautiful. You taught me that I could love again, that I didn't have to do this alone. Courtney was openly sobbing now, nodding before her hands could even form words. Finally, she signed, Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes. The cafe erupted in applause. The kids screamed, well, 3 of them screamed. Atlas jumped up and down, feeling the vibrations and grinning. Jonathan slipped the ring onto Courtney's finger, then pulled her into his arms. I love you, she signed against his chest. I love you too, he signed back. Thank you for tripping in this doorway. Courtney laughed through her tears. Thank you for helping me gather my things. 6 months later, on a perfect spring morning, Courtney Lane became Courtney Myers in a ceremony conducted entirely in sign language with an interpreter for the hearing guests. The small venue was packed with friends and family. 4 children served at the wedding party. Atlas was the ring bearer, carrying the rings with solemn importance. Aurelia and Leora were flower girls, scattering petals with uneven enthusiasm. Orion was the mood setter, which apparently meant he made everyone laugh by signing jokes at inappropriate moments. The officiant signed the ceremony as the interpreter translated for hearing guests. When it came time for vows, both Jonathan and Courtney had to pause multiple times, overcome with emotion. Jonathan signed, You taught me that broken things can become beautiful, that families aren't just born, they're built, that love speaks every language, especially silence. Courtney signed, You showed me that I wasn't broken, I was just waiting. That 4 kids asking, Are you our new mommy, wasn't crazy, it was destiny. That home isn't a place, it's you, it's them, it's us. When the officiant signed, "You may kiss," Jonathan pulled Courtney close and kissed her, while their 4 children cheered and guests applauded in a mix of sounds and signs. At the reception, Atlas gave a speech in sign language that had everyone crying again. His small hands moved with careful precision. Before Courtney, I felt different, like something was wrong with me. But Courtney is like me, and she's not wrong, she's perfect. She taught me that being deaf doesn't mean being less, it means being me. And being me is okay now, because I have a family who loves me exactly how I am. "Thank you for being our mom," Atlas signed. "We've been waiting for you our whole lives." Courtney hugged him so tightly he squeaked, and when she pulled back, she signed, "I've been waiting for you too. I just didn't know it."
The final dance of the evening was a family dance, all 6 of them on the floor, moving to music only 4 of them could hear, but all of them could feel in the vibrations of the speakers, in the joy vibrating through their bones. Courtney held Atlas's hands as he spun in circles, his face glowing with happiness. Jonathan had Leora on his feet, letting her dance, while Aurelia and Orion attempted some kind of coordinated shimmy that mostly looked like organized chaos. Atlas suddenly stopped spinning and signed to Courtney. "Are you happy?" Courtney knelt down so she was eye level with him, her wedding dress pooling around her. "Happier than I ever thought possible." "Good," Atlas signed, with serious satisfaction, "because you're ours now, forever." "Forever," Courtney signed back, pulling him into a hug. One by one, the other 3 children joined the embrace, wrapping their small arms around Courtney until Jonathan had no choice but to join in, encircling all 5 of them. In that moment, pressed together in the middle of a dance floor, with music and laughter swirling around them, they were complete. No more loneliness, no more searching, no more wondering if they were too much or not enough. They had found each other in the most unexpected way, through a stumble, a helping hand, and 4 children who believed in magic before the adults even knew it existed. Sometimes families aren't born, sometimes they're built, one sign, one smile, one act of kindness at a time. And sometimes the people who feel most broken are exactly the ones meant to make each other whole. This was their beginning. This was their always. This was home. If this story touched your heart the way it touched mine, please don't let it end here. Let it remind you, kindness still matters, compassion still changes lives, and hope is never wasted. Subscribe and be part of our Soul Lift Stories family, where every story lifts the spirit and reminds us that light always finds its way back. And if this moment moved you, share it, because sometimes sharing hope is the kindest thing we can do.